It's not a teaching that's being offered here. It's more accurately an invitation. It's an invitation into the peace and consciousness of being. It's not an invitation into my peace, my consciousness. It's not an invitation into your peace, your consciousness. It's the peace, the consciousness of being. If you can just realize that I'm not speaking of something that I've got or that you've got. I'm speaking of what has me and what has you. The consciousness of being. The peace of being. Not your being, not my being, not your body, not my body, not your thoughts, not my thoughts. The consciousness of being, where my thoughts and your thoughts and my body and all bodies appear. In our culture, we make a tragic conclusion based on perception. And the conclusion is that since you and I appear separate, we therefore must be separate. So there's an elevation of perception into authority. But as you know, if you have been aware of perception for any time, perception is subject to change, subject to disagreement. Some beings have the capacity to perceive realms that other beings don't have that same capacity. Flies, for instance, perceive an altogether different universe from human beings. And among human beings, the same thing. So if there's just that slight understanding, which is seemingly not profound or deep, but is quite profound and quite deep in its simplicity, and the recognition that therefore what I perceive is bound to be limited by the conditioning of my species or my family or my likes or my immune system, whatever, then there's this crack in the authority. And that crack is where the invitation invites you to come in. Come in through that crack. There's an opening. The world is not as you think it is. You are not as you think you are. I am not as you think me to be. The thoughts about the world or you or me are based on perceptions. Inner perceptions or outer perceptions. These perceptions are limited. Just recognize that. Then there's a possibility to hear the invitation into the truth of yourself, which is imperceivable, unable to be perceived, unable to be conceived, and yet permeating everything that's perceived or conceived. So I'm very happy to extend this invitation to you, who is my own self. So I invite you to meet the truth of who you are. That's what this is. That's what this meeting is. For you to meet yourself, not as you have perceived yourself. For you to meet other, not as you have perceived other. I am honored that my teacher and his teacher promised me that those who want to hear will hear. I am offering that honor to you. That's the honoring yourself, not honoring your opinions or your thoughts or your looks or your emotions or your troubles, your suffering. You can honor all that if you like. It's not required. To accept this invitation is to discover the true honor of yourself. And to accept this invitation is to extend this invitation to every aspect of yourself. Internal, external, doesn't matter. Those are just perceptions. Ramana's gift is the gift of self-inquiry, of really investigating who you are, who one is, what is real, what's really real here, and what's illusion, what's passing and temporary, and what's permanent, what's eternal, and what's temporal. True investigation. So my phrasing of that is to tell the truth. Just tell the truth. When people hear this, I've noticed that they will tell the truth and then assume that's as far as it goes. So the truth may be, oh, well, I'm feeling bad. Oh, I'm feeling bad. So that's the truth. And that's it. That's the truth. I'm feeling bad. But that's not the truth. That's what you're feeling. It's the truth that you're feeling that. But that's not the truth. It's important to be able to know what it is you're feeling. But to tell the truth is deeper, closer than any feeling. Perhaps the initial deepening around feeling is, well, I'm feeling bad. And if you don't just stop there as though that were the truth, you can investigate deeper, either into who is it that is feeling bad, or what is it that feels bad, rather than settling for a relative truth as the truth. I mentioned yesterday that I had spoken to a group of people and I had told them that I didn't know I was telling myself a story of victimhood. I thought it was a truth, just the truth. I had some rotten things happen to me. That's the truth. Therefore, I'm miserable. That's the truth. It's like a religion. It's not the truth. It's experiences that have happened, So it's as true as far as it goes, relatively speaking. There have been experiences that are rotten, let us say. But deeper than those experiences, deeper than any feeling, deeper than any thought, closer than any thought, closer than any feeling, closer than any experience, is the truth. Our conditioned existence, our suffering existence, takes what is felt, what is sensed, what is experienced as the truth, and there is then the suffering, the cycle of suffering. It's the cycle of suffering that stops with feelings, thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. The story, the emotional story, the physical story, the mental story, the circumstantial story, as the truth, rather than the emotional story. The emotional story that may be happening is one of anguish or one of bliss, but it's not the truth. You understand the distinction I'm making? Good. So I can be quiet then. Good. I feel it's an essential understanding. It's part of discriminating wisdom. We have lived our lives so superficially and then suffered for that superficiality, because within each one of us there is this depth of truth, this depth of being that wants itself known, wants itself felt, expressed, met. And as long as there's a settling for, well, I feel this is the truth, therefore it is the truth, then the deeper revelation is overlooked, is missed, tragically missed. So the invitation from Papaji, when he says to stop, is really to stop telling your story. One instant. Less than an instant. Stop telling your story, even if it's a good story. Just stop. Yes, and immediately the truth is told. You cannot tell the truth if you're telling the story, and you cannot tell the truth if you're telling your story. Did I say that twice? You cannot tell your story if you're telling the truth. And you cannot tell the truth if you're telling your story. It's so obvious, isn't it? So there, great religions are founded, institutes, messiahs, avatars, devas, all around this very simple immediacy. Stop. Stop telling your story. Right now. Right now. Not later when the story gets better, or not later when the story gets worse. Just right now. Someone was up here yesterday, Karen was up here speaking about postponement. That's it. To stop telling your story right now is to stop postponement. And then the truth is told, however it is told, whether it is articulated, whether it is felt, whether it is sensed, whether it is whatever. That's what I'm interested in. That's what my teacher, Papaji, sent me to you, to invite you to stop, to prove to you that it is possible to stop, and to demonstrate to you that it is easy to stop, that the difficulty and the effort is in the resistance to stopping. That resistance is fed, of course, by hope, that the story of who you are will give you what it is you are yearning for. And if you can just fix the story, emotionally, physically, circumstantially, just mentally, just fix it. Just tweak it a little. Make the necessary changes, you will get what you want. And everyone in this room knows that, because you've all experienced that. And you can change the story, and you can make it a better story. And yes, that's great. I support you in a better story. It's much better to have a better story. But my purpose in appearing to you in your story is to invite you to stop this instant. When you stop telling your story, you will stop telling your story about me, or him, or her, or them, or us. And in less than an instant, you know what it means to be who you are. Then let the story appear or disappear. It doesn't touch who you are. It's like going to sleep at night and having a dream. It has a beginning, it has an end. It seemed real when it was happening, but it's obviously a dream. That's what is meant to wake up. To wake up. And to wake up in the dream. To wake up before the story ends, which each story will end. This physical story will end. This mental story will end. This emotional story will end. To wake up in the story. In nighttime dreaming, it's lucid dreaming. So you have the capacity to live a lucid life. A lucid life, a clear life, an authentic life. There may still be a physical story. This body, as your body, has a physical story based on genetics and environment and early nourishment or lack of nourishment. It has a story. It will play itself out. But you are the lucidity that story appears in. Regardless of the direction the body story is going, you are the clear light that it appears in. And if for one instant your attention is withdrawn from the physical story, or the mental story, or the emotional story, or the circumstantial story, you know yourself clearly as clarity, as spaciousness, as indefinableness. I want to continue what I started last night about the possibility of telling the truth and how that's usually interpreted as recognizing and saying and believing that what one is thinking or feeling or experiencing is the truth. Relatively speaking, in a limited kind of way, temporarily, it is the truth. But when I'm speaking of telling the truth, it's the willingness to see what's deeper than the relative experience, than the immediate conclusion that's based on sensory perception. Concluded based on past conditioning. So that then what one is feeling is free to be acknowledged rather than to be hidden or acted out on. It's acknowledged. I'm feeling angry. If it's recognized to be something that's passing and temporary and not the absolute truth, just the relative truth, then there's a freedom to experience feeling angry without denying it and without acting out, without discharging that anger onto someone else or imploding with the anger into yourself. Is this clear so far? We have such a network, a tangle, an entanglement with our concepts about feelings and emotions and thoughts and circumstances, experiences, as to what they mean about who one really is. And so when we get information based on emotions or thoughts or circumstances, and we don't like that information, we either deny it or we dramatize it in some way, like poor me or bad you. Or the denial is nothing's happening, I'm not feeling anything, everything's fine. So we all know all these strategies. It's the result of the misidentification that who you are is who you feel yourself to be, is who you think yourself to be, is who you experience yourself to be. That's the truth of who you are. And that's a lie. It's not the truth. In the willingness to really experience what is deeper than what the immediate experience is, first of all, there has to be the willingness to experience what's immediately here. And then from that, to see what is under that or deeper than that. Finally, there is miraculously, instantly, a recognition of oneself as spacious, free, at peace consciousness, aware of itself, the truth of who one is. And most people in this room have had at least a taste of that, or a glimpse of that. Usually what follows that then, when that state passes and some emotion or some thought or some circumstance which has meant that you are not that radiant, free consciousness, when some state or emotion or thought appears, there is either the oh no, I lost it, here is this horrible thing again, or there's this, oops, I remember that I am radiant free consciousness. And so then the memory, I am radiant free consciousness, actually becomes a lie. You understand how the mind works this way? And so then this lie, I'm radiant free consciousness, is a lid on experiencing whatever is appearing just as it is appearing, so that the deeper experience can reveal yourself to be, in truth, radiant free consciousness. Not in concept, but in truth. So the speaking that I do with people, the meeting that I have with people, is really always around this. There is some concept of who one is, and either that concept is good or it's bad. But it's a concept. And it's based on past conditioning. And the concept itself works as resistance to the experiencing of whatever is appearing and the discovery of what is deeper than that experience. I just want to lay it out, so that you'll know what I'm saying, at least, when I say tell the truth. I'm not saying pretend that you're happy if you're sad. I'm saying whether you are happy or sad, tell the truth about what is deeper than that. And this is radical to most people, because most people who are feeling sad just want to feel happy again. That's the truth. That's as far as it goes. Or if they're feeling happy, they just want to always feel that happiness, never feel sad again. And that's a very superficial level of resistance to change. The changing condition is a law of feelings, states of mind, thoughts, and circumstances. Period. It is the law of this planet. It is the law of the 5 elements of your body. It is the law of weather. It's the law of seasons. It's the law of hours in a day. If that can be surrendered to rather than resisted, then feelings of unhappiness are feelings of unhappiness. They have nothing of any more significance than that they are feelings of unhappiness. And in that they can be experienced, like the sun can be experienced, or the rain can be experienced, or cold can be experienced, or heat can be experienced, night can be experienced, day can be experienced, so that you don't just have to always have spring, because you don't. That's the way it is. And those who live in climates where it's always spring are asleep, because it's kind of lulling into it's always spring, it's always spring. So there's not this tempering of recognition of, no, it's not. Sometimes there are very horrible things that appear. Sometimes there are very beautiful things that appear. Whether those things be gross or whether they be subtle, as in your emotional body or your mental body. You are not a thing. You are not a thing. The image that you have of yourself is a thing. It's a subtle thing. The experience you have of yourself is a thing. It's based on sensory perception and whatever the mind and nervous system then does with that. It's an emotional realm thing. Empty and nothing, essentially, but a thing because it has form. It has beginning and it has end. And it's separate from other things. That's what defines a thing. Something that is separate from other things. Right? That's a pretty simple definition. So you see, it can be in all realms. It doesn't just have to be made of big molecules. It can be very subtle, but still is distinct from something else. And so we have assigned our identification to something. Obviously a physical thing, and a mental thing, a thought, and with that thought an image, and then we spend our time throwing that thing at other things and into the future, finding things to latch onto it. This is called Leela, or samsara, or the world as we know it. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It is absolutely wondrous. It's the result of the mystery of God. It is huge. And there's nothing wrong with that. The error is in accepting that as reality, rather than the power of mind, which is a wondrous power. And the tragedy of that acceptance is the suffering. Because underneath it all, there is the direct knowledge that you are radiant, free consciousness. When that gets covered by the belief and the acceptance of yourself as a physical thing or an emotional thing or a mental thing, then that's a lie. And there is always suffering with a lie. Now we're speaking of huge collective suffering, at least since the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Huge suffering. But at any point, you have the full potential, the capacity to stop, to tell the truth. What is here? Sadness, anger, okay. Sadness, anger is here. What else is here? What is deeper than that? At any point, you have the opportunity to throw your reflection, rather than into the future, back into this moment, so that you self-reflect, so that you can truly self-inquire into what is real, what is true, what is not subject to change. Everything is subject to change. You are not subject to change. So whatever it is you think you are, if you will check that out and see, is it subject to change, then as an experiment, discard it. And tell the truth about what is not subject to change, what hasn't changed with the changing of your body, what hasn't changed with the changing of your circumstances, what doesn't change when your emotions change. To tell the truth all the way. Do not settle for a superficial, relative thing truth, but all the way, so that you know yourself as the truth, which is not a thing. The question, who am I, in its power and its simplicity, throws the mind back to the basic assumption that I am somebody. It's as if in our vernacular it'd be, oh yeah, who? Who? And this is so rarely examined, because what usually happens is, I am somebody and this is what I need, this is what I want, this is what I have, this is what I don't have, this is what I had, this is what I should have had, on and on and on and on. So I speak about that as the story. One's story keeps one identified as a person separate from consciousness itself, intelligence itself, the vastness. Keeps one identified as a particular form, a body, which is subject to birth and death. So this is, of course, we all know this is individuation. And there's nothing wrong with this. This I want to make very clear. There is nothing evil about this. There's nothing wrong about this. Nothing bad about this. Very important to understand that as spiritual seekers. Once one is caught by the spiritual search and hears, maybe hears in a limited way, but hears that this personal identification is the obstruction to the true identification of oneself as totality or universal, then there is the drive to get rid of the story. Because it's bad and it's wrong and it's evil and it's separating who you are from God. But this is still just part of the story. It's really important to see. This is now just a tangent of the story. I have to get rid of this story of I so that I can be close to God. It's pretty smart, huh? This is the wiliness of this huge power of mind to project. In spiritual circles, what I have seen often happens, rather than the real examination of who am I, there is a tendency to actually suppress the story. So there's no story going on here, but obviously there's also no expansion, there's no peace, there's no resting in the beauty and transcendence of oneself. So there is a story going on. But now, since there's an identified spiritual seeker, it's suppressed. So there may be repressed stories, the story of the human race, the story of the DNA, but this is like a conscious act to get rid of the story. So it's denied. It's pushed into a denial mode. Doesn't mean it's not operating. It's still operating, in fact, bigger than ever. But it's subconsciously operating, so it's not seen. And there is this, why am I still suffering? I don't really have a story. The suffering is the proof there is a story going on. And if you're willing to not have that story be bad and wrong and evil and the problem, then there can be a willingness to simply see what is the story. Just to see it. What is the story? This is a challenge, of course, because we have substituted our worldly conditioning with spiritual conditioning. And we know intellectually the story shouldn't be there. So that's the burning that can happen. The story is there. Telling the truth has to be more important even than getting close to God. Has to be more important than enlightenment. Has to be more important than happiness. Telling the truth. Because in this devotion to telling the truth, and the deeper truth, and the deeper truth, the story will be revealed in all of its shocking dimensions. And it is shocking what's going on. Self-inquiry is not a fixed statement, the statement, who am I? If it becomes a fixed statement, it is very easy for the mind to use that. Self-inquiry is a way of being, a way of living that reveals who is being, who is living. But not as a rote exercise, because again it becomes very easy for the mind to co-opt that. It's the willingness to stop and ask yourself, as you just experienced, the question, what is going on? What is being thought? What is being believed? Is it real? Is it true? And the possibility of recognizing that it is just thought. However strong the thought may be, it is thought. And that deeper than that thought, before that thought, and after that thought, and gloriously even during that thought, there's the truth of who is. There's the truth that you are. In the recognition of this truth and the honoring of that recognition and the deepening of that recognition, you naturally discover your very nature is happiness. Not a happiness that excludes pain or conflict or disturbance, but a happiness that is all-inclusive, that is in love. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yes. As the awakening process starts in a human mind, one of the first events is the recognition of the immense contradictions of life, of existence, the beauty and the horror in one's own experience of life and in the recognition of the global experience, the exquisite and the ugly, the divine, the holy, and the evil, the horror. And with this, it's a shock to the system, because before that, there's just a kind of ruminating existence, like a wonderful, sweet cow in the field, just ruminating. There's horror in the cow's life, whether it's a day-to-day horror of disease or irritation through treatment or insects, and finally the horror of being slaughtered, of course. And they do experience the horror of that. But in the human brain, or human evolution, there's a recognition of that horror before the slaughter. And there's usually in that recognition, well, either there's a going deeper to sleep so that the horror just can be denied, but nobody in this room has been able to deny it fully anyway, or you'd be out ruminating somewhere, pleasurably. With that, there arises this desire or need to understand what is going on, what does it mean, how to get out of it, to understand who one is, what the plan is. Is it an evil universe? Is it a holy universe? And in that desire or that need, then a search begins, a search to understand. And of course we go to our parents and they tell us a certain version of reality, and we accept it or we reject it. At a certain point we have our religions and they tell us a version of reality, what it all means, what it's all about, what your place in it is. Same with schools, education, drugs, lovemaking. Moments of oceanic experience tell us what it's all about. Moments of dire, abject falling from grace tell us what it's all about. And the confusion continues. In one moment, we know absolutely we are one with the universe, and there is all perfection. Whether it's a split second of just looking into a baby's face, or whether it's a longer period of time, we know it. And then also we know it is meaningless, it is horrible, and we don't know anything. And so this search for understanding continues. Well, I gotta find out. I gotta go to somebody who can tell me finally what it's all about. I know this, of course, because this was the story of my life until I met my teacher. And he invited me to stop all searching. I thought I knew what that meant, like stop running around, stop experimenting. He really meant stop all searching. I didn't get that he meant stop the search for understanding, because the way I was hearing it, of course, at that point, the search for understanding was supreme. That's what got me to him, in my mind. But when I really let that word stop into my consciousness, really all the way into my consciousness, I recognized he means really stop. And he said, just for 1 second. Anybody can stop for 1 second. And when I let that word in and I recognize that surely there is 1 second in the many seconds of this lifetime that I can stop all searching, in that instant, there was the peace that was beyond understanding. There was the inclusion of all horror and all beauty in that peace. There was the inclusion of all desperation and all relaxation. But not through understanding. There is understanding. There is profound understanding. But it follows the experience. In our search for understanding, we have understanding trying to lead the experience. You understand this? We put, I gotta understand, out there as the leader. And so every experience that is brought to us, we try to understand it. And we have our little niches of where to put it. Oh, well, this is spiritual, this is not spiritual. This is good, this is bad, this is me, this is them. And it's the same confusion. Because once again, it's the mind, the great power of mind, leading the lifetime. And the mind is not equipped to lead. It is exquisitely equipped to discover, to follow. But not to lead. And so the invitation that I offer you again is that whatever you are searching for, however worldly or spiritual you think it to be, in this moment, in our time together, stop. Just stop. There may be a huge fear that arises. The fear that if you stop, then you will lose all that you have gained. If you stop, you will die. If you stop, you will never make it. I understand this fear, but the great encouragement of all of those great beings who have gone before us is the proof, the witnessing, that what is revealed in the mind truly stopping is absolutely good news. It includes the bad news, but it is absolutely good news. You know this from the sutras, you know this from the holy beings. You already know this. Only you can't quite believe it's true because you don't understand it. And you want to understand it because then there will be some control of it. Then it will have a place. It will either be religious or spiritual or existential, or there'll be a me or a not me. There'll be a particular name to the philosophy, or you'll invent a whole new philosophy. So the willingness to know what you know in the core of your being without understanding it is effortless. The effort arises in this attachment to having to understand it, so that then you can know it and remember it, so that it will be there for you if you get into trouble. The invitation is to stop that search. To stop it right now. And to meet whatever has fueled the search. To meet it right now. To not move in any direction of rejection or grasping. To be still, regardless of the fear, the anxiety, the helplessness, the hopelessness, the despair, the bliss, the thrill, the explosion, regardless. To be here, not understanding a thing. And in that instant, to tell the truth about who is it who needs to understand. Who needs to understand? Is it a fabrication of mind that has been fed to you as the necessity of being an individual and surviving as an individual? In inquiring into the reality of that, you discover that consciousness already knows itself, is mystified by itself, and in the surrender to that mystery of itself, knows itself even deeper. And what understandings, even the most profound understandings, the most profound non-dualistic understandings, whatever understandings come, are secondary. That there is no control over consciousness. And that who you are is consciousness. The resolution of it all, the totality of beingness, the byproduct of this is quite exquisite, and often there is a capacity to articulate it, as we know from the sutras and the holy books. But once there is the thought that is believed that now I know it, now I understand it, now it is mine, it's no longer a mystery. It's a philosophy, it's a concept, it's a story about a moment of truth that happened to somebody sometime. who did it happen to? Who gets enlightened? The hope is me. This fiction, this internalized image of oneself as an individual attached to a particular body. Ruminating, chewing, chewing, chewing. So, at a certain point you will say, I don't understand anything. I do understand. I don't understand. I do understand. So the moment there is a surrender to not understanding, you do understand. And the moment you do understand, you don't understand. Our conditioning is to try to keep the understanding in place, but that's not understanding. That's in the realm of understanding, like understanding how to tie your shoes, understanding how to have good manners, understanding how to learn a new language, understanding how to cross the street. That's where understanding is. Understanding higher math. That's understanding is a beautiful power of mind. But it is useless in the search for yourself. So the radicalness of Papaji's invitation, offering no ledge to stand on, and destroying every ledge that the mind builds to reveal there is no one there needing a ledge, is the invitation to stop. Our time together, we spend playing with the mind, loosening it, so that what is already known can be acknowledged. Known without anyone knowing it. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, it's no problem. If it does make sense to you, you already know exactly what I'm speaking about. Then our time together is the possibility to recognize where have there been little tendrils of ownership that have appeared in the mind's activity. And is there a willingness in this moment, right now, to understand nothing, to have nothing, to lose everything, to be nothing? Very simple. Just before I came, I was reading a letter that I got, someone who was formally requesting to be my student. I don't usually get this kind of letter, but it was interesting, so I read it, and he wanted to know, first of all, what level of enlightenment I offered. So the ones who've heard me speaking are laughing, and the other ones are going, yeah, what level? I realize it's very important to reiterate what this invitation is from my teacher and from his teacher. Because the world we live in, whether it's a religious world or a spiritual world or a worldly world, has very much to do with levels. And so don't discount levels. They are, if we are observing the worlds we live in, we'll see there are levels. There are higher and lower levels. And it seems like the ones in the middle suffer the most in all realms. Because there's a memory of being a lower level, and there's a hope to getting to a higher level, and a fear of sinking back into a lower level. So human beings are at a very high level of development. But within human beings, of course, there's the recognition of how far there is to go, how primitive in so many ways, how basic. And this gets transferred to spiritual understanding and understanding, religious understanding too. How close are you to God? So if you're Catholic, you were perhaps brought up to think the Pope is the closest to God, and then the cardinals, or the bishops, and then the cardinals, and then the priest, and then you're somewhere down there. And if you were brought up in the medical paradigm, the doctor is the one. And then next to the doctor is the physician's assistant, and then next to that is the nurse, and then down to the orderly, and then the one sweeping up the floor. So everywhere we see these levels. And we think we want to know what it takes to be enlightened and what it takes to be fully enlightened, and who has the highest level of enlightenment, and how high can I get, and what's required, because that's the way we live. So in this letter from a student, I have to take it seriously. He's had another teacher, a yogic teacher, and yoga deals very much with levels. But I also have to laugh, really laugh, and I hope he will appreciate the laughter as much as I appreciate his seriousness. Because this invitation is to recognize what has no levels, what is free of levels, what is free of evolution, what is free of devolution, what is free of advancement, what is free of retreat, what is free of success, what is free of failure, what is free of enlightenment, what is free of ignorance. That which is free is the truth of who you already are. That which is bound to levels, has only to do with what you think you are, or where your body is, or where your powers are, or where your capacity for communication, or the maturity of the emotional body. But the truth of who you are is alive and awake and free. And this invitation that I offer you from my teacher and from his teacher is to stop for a moment, stop seeking the next level, stop fearing the level you were just in might come back and get you, and be still, just be here, and see what has always been absolutely, completely unaffected by any level of anything or anybody. And know that to be yourself. Then the levels of understanding that follow that are amazing. They are beautiful, and they continue. But they are coming from the truth, the core of the matter, which is present when there is no understanding, which is present when there is all understanding. That's what I invite you to discover. So that when I see people whose faces I've never seen, and I see people whose faces I've seen and perhaps profound, intimate conversations we have had. There is no ranking. There is no ranking. I mean, it looks like a ranking here because I'm on the stage. But that's the play. And I'm on the stage so that you will pay attention to me as someone who has a level of something you want, so that I can tell you and invite you into being leveled. It is truly a radical invitation because it offers nothing. Nothing. No great powers. There may be powers, but they are to not be touched. Not bliss every day. Not anything. Only yourself. And you are not anything. You might think yourself to be something, or want yourself to be something, or even fear that you are not anything. But the truth of meeting yourself and discovering, truly discovering, that you are not anything, then you are free, and you are free to see yourself in everything, in every level, in every success and every failure, in every advancement and every retreat, in every ignorance and every enlightenment. So I welcome you to this invitation, and I offer it fully, knowing you have the full capacity to accept or reject. It's up to you. It's not my business. That's not my level of work, whether you accept or reject. But to offer it to you fully, acknowledging that there is the capacity to accept the invitation to investigate in the truth of who you are. And our conversations here, our time together, is multi-leveled. There is the play and the seriousness and the laughter and the tears and the anger even, and the fear and the despair and the hooray, and the questions and the answers. But at the core of it is we are meeting one to another. And we are being invited into that meeting to recognize that one recognized in another is meeting oneself for the first time.